versatile Fusion Surface countertop system is prep. And we're going to demonstrate the prep on this old, worn out laminate countertop. This is going to be one of the most popular surfaces that get resurfaced with our resin system, but the same principles and prep steps are going to apply no matter if it's laminate like this, whether it's wood, concrete, stone, tile, or any other surface. So there's a few basic tools that we need. We need a palm sander, something like this, with as low of a grit sandpaper as you can get. In this particular case, I'm using a 40 grit. We need some safety glasses, and then we'll use some denatured alcohol to clean up the surface when we're done. So let's start sanding, getting this surface ready for the Fusion Surface countertop system. Alright, so as you can see, we've sanded this surface with a palm sander using a 40 grit sandpaper. This is a laminate countertop, so it sands pretty easy. And what we were looking for was just a scratch pattern like this, just so that it promotes better adhesion with the primer. The next step here is now to just clean this up, and we're going to use some denatured alcohol on a rag to do that. So we're just going to pour some denatured alcohol out onto the surface here, and we're going to use a cloth to wipe up the dust. And this is also going to get any oil, grease, any other debris off of the surface. Again, we don't want anything on this surface that's going to cause any bond issues. Even though the primer is super bonding strength, we want to do everything that we can in the prep process in order to promote the best adhesion of the product. So we're just giving it a wipe with this denatured alcohol. This is going to take off any surface imperfections, any contaminants that are on the surface. So now that we've got our surface prepped, the next step in the process is to prime the surface. And to do that, we're going to use our Fusion Surface Primer. So the Fusion Surface Primer is a 4-to-1 mix. So we're going to go ahead and mix that up now. So it's 4 parts of A, 1 part of B. So we're just going to do that in a little mixing container here. So in this case, we're going to mix up 20 ounces. So there's our 16 ounces of A. And then we'll go ahead and add in our 4 ounces of B. So we'll go ahead and we'll mix this with a drill and a mixing paddle for about 2 minutes. And we do it just on a moderate speed. It is a water-based primer, so it mixes up very easy. All right, so that's all it needs, is about 2 minutes of mixing. And now we're going to go ahead and roll it on our countertop surface. So applying the primer is a very simple step, but it's a very important step. A few basic things to keep in mind is that we're looking for a thin, even coat, no puddles of primer left on the surface. So what we can do is we can just pour out a little bead of it like this, and then we use our roller to start rolling it in place. And again, depending on the surface that you're applying it to, that's going to dictate really how it absorbs into the surface. If you're working with a more porous surface, then obviously it's going to soak up more and you might find yourself using a little bit more. But in general, this is going to spread really well. And again, we're looking for a thin coat, but an even coat, no puddles. Here's the final look of our surface that's been primed with the Fusion Surface Primer. As you can see, it's a nice even coat with a nice even sheen. And this surface has been allowed to dry for several hours, and we're now ready for the next step, which is to get our Fusion Pigments ready for the Fusion Surface system that we're going to install on top of this countertop. So here is our Fusion Pigment, and in this particular video we're demonstrating the Coronado surface. So with that kit comes the colors that you need, which is white, black, and burnt sienna. Now, depending on the kit that you get, we're going to supply you with the right colors and the right amount of each color. But we go ahead and we mix up our colors at this stage in our cups to pour because it does take a little bit of time. So we're going to go ahead and demonstrate how we do that now. So again, we have our 3 different colors here, and we're going to use these plastic cups. These are 16-ounce cups, and we're going to make up about 8 cups here. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to lay these out like that on our surface, and we're going to give our bottles of Fusion Pigment, shake them up because some of the pigments can settle during shipment. So we'll shake these up, and then we're going to go ahead and pour. Now there's no real rhyme or reason or any particular way that you have to pour these, but this is the way that I like to do it. So I'm going to take all the lids off here to get them ready. So I'm going to start with white, and as you can see, I'm going to pour just a little bit into each cup. And basically what we're going to do throughout this process is we're going to layer the colors in the cup. And again, there's no exact science to this, but we are trying to get approximately the same amount of pigment in each cup for each pour that we do. So again, in this case for the Coronado, we're using white, black, and burnt sienna. And so we are just going to continue this process, pouring white, black, and burnt sienna into each cup until these cups are full. All right, so we have our cups of Fusion Pigment all mixed up. They're ready for us to install on this surface. But before we do that, the next step is to get our Fusion Flow resin ready. So let's go ahead and do that now. So the next step is to get our Fusion Flow resin ready and then to apply it to the surface. So in order to do that, we're going to get a mixing container, and this is a 2-to-1 mix. So we're going to get a mixing container, and we're going to dump in the 32 ounces of our part A, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to put in our part B. So again, it's a 2-to-1 mix. So there we have it. And then for this Coronado combination that we're doing, it's a titanium metallic base coat. So we're going to go ahead and add in our titanium pigment into the Fusion Flow resin. We're going to go ahead and take a drill and a mixing paddle, and we're going to mix this up for about 2 minutes. All right, so we've got that thoroughly mixed. Our titanium metallic pigment is in there, and we're gonna go ahead and set all of our tools off to the side, and then we're gonna apply it to this countertop surface. Go ahead and pour our Fusion Flow resin out onto the surface. Now, there are several ways that we can put this out onto the surface. We could use a squeegee, we could use a roller, a paintbrush. There's a number of different tools that you can use. I just like to use my hands to do it. I feel it's the easiest way, the fastest way, and it saves me from having to dirty up another tool. So I just take my hands, and we're just trying to put, again, a thin layer on the surface. This will level out. And this Fusion Flow resin is specifically formulated to work in conjunction with the Fusion Pigments to give us the look that we're going for. So as you can see, we're not doing anything fancy here. We're just working the material, just trying to get a thin coat over the whole surface. And then we don't want to forget about our edges, so we'll go ahead with our hand and we'll just put a thin layer on the edges as well. All right, so really that's all there is to it, is we've just spread out the Fusion Flow resin over the surface, and this is going to act really as the carrier for the Fusion pigment resin. So let's go ahead and get our resin that we've already mixed up and start applying it to this surface. So here we are ready to apply our Fusion pigment, and you can see these are the cups that we already have mixed up and are ready to go, and you can see just the incredible cells that are already being created on its own even before it interacts with the epoxy resin. So we're going to go ahead now and we're going to demonstrate how to apply the Fusion pigment onto this surface, and we always begin with the edge. So we're going to take this cup and very simply we're going to pour it just right along the edge of our surface, and we're not trying to cover the edge. We're going to allow the pigment to be able to flow over the edge. So we just pour it out. And the beauty of this system is that the pigments do all the work. So again, we're taking 1 cup and we're covering this whole island. This island's pretty big. It's about a 4 foot by 7.5 foot island. So we're using 1 cup to go around the edge. And we have some left, so we'll go again. Here's where we started. And you can see what's already happening with this pigment as it interacts with our Fusion Flow resin. It's already starting to take on the look of natural stone. You're seeing the layers and ribbons of different color. So we're gonna go ahead now and we're gonna continue pouring. This is the same cup that we started with, and we're just going around the edge for a second time. But you can already see what it's creating on the edges. And we'll just continue to go around the edge of this surface as many times as the content of this 1 cup allows us to do so. And I like to try to get almost all of it out of the cup because, as you'll see later, even these little tiny ribbons that are coming out of the bottom of the cup, they're going to create some really, really cool designs and veins within the surface once we're complete. All right, so we've taken 1 of our cups and we've poured it around the edge, and you can already see what's beginning to happen to the edge. It's already starting to look like really just a natural piece of stone. But now what we want to do is we want to fill in the whole entire center of our piece here. And again, there's some different techniques and different tools that can be used to do it, but this is the way we like to do it, and we feel we get the best overall look from doing it. So we're going to use basically a drywall knife. This is a 10-inch knife. You could use a smaller one, a bigger one, but this is a 10-inch knife. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to pour out ribbons of the Fusion pigment from our cups onto the blade, and then we're going to use the blade to transfer it onto the surface of our countertop. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So this is how we pour it out. And you see that I did it over the surface. Some of it has dripped on the surface, and that's totally fine. But with the material that's on the blade, we're going to go ahead now and transfer it to the surface. So the way we do that is just by holding the knife up and letting it drip off. And then we go back and forth a couple times, like that. Repeat the process. Pour another ribbon. Pour it up onto the surface. And we're just going to continue to repeat this process over and over and over until we've covered the surface with the Fusion pigment. And again, you'll see that this is a process. So as you begin putting the Fusion pigment out onto the surface, it might look like it's real blotchy, like you're missing spots. That's okay. Because what's going to be happening here, and you can probably already see it happening on the surface here, the Fusion Flow resin, which works in conjunction with the Fusion pigment, has been specially formulated for these resins to interact with one another. And the Fusion Flow resin underneath that contains our metallic pigment, it's actually causing the Fusion Flow pigment to move, to spread, to separate. So that's why we're perhaps started off with a very thin ribbon or vein that was here, and now you can already see how it's expanding to give us this look of natural stone. So we're going to continue that throughout the whole entire surface until it's fully covered. So again, pour it out onto the surface. And we want to make sure we go right off the edge so that it blends with our edge. And we just go back and forth. So again, this system has been specially formulated, and the Fusion Pigments only work with this system. They only work with the Fusion Flow resin. Both components are resins, and they will harden together as one system. So what I've done on this particular kitchen island, again, it's a fairly large size. It's about 4 foot by 7.5 foot. I'm using 1 cup to do 1/2, then I'm going to use another cup to go over and do the other half. So I'm only concentrating right now on just this first half. And again, I know that 1 cup on this half is not going to be enough to give me the look that I want, but this is just my starting point. So I like to try to get every drop out of the cup as much as possible, and letting it pour out like this and basically draining the cup creates some real unique veins throughout the piece. And again, I'm going to take my cup and I'm going to go right off the edge. So I'm going to get a second cup of the Fusion Pigment. I'm going to go ahead and do the other side. So it's been probably about 5 minutes since I poured the cup on the edge, and you can see just this incredible detail that's starting to form when you look at this. I mean, this really just looks like natural stone, and as you saw, it was so easy to do. It was literally just pouring it out onto the surface and then allowing these resins to interact with one another to create this stunning look. So as I work over on this side, we're giving the other side some time to kind of settle in and move and flow. And then by the time I finish this side and go back over there, I'm gonna have a really good idea of how much more of the pigment that I want to add. And this is a system that takes few minutes for it to develop. So we just need to trust the system. And we have had both professionals and amateurs alike do this system, and the results are absolutely incredible every time. All right, so you remember that when we started, we took a cup of our Fusion Flow pigment and we poured it all along the edge, and we were able to go around like 2.5 to 3 times. But what's happening is as the Fusion Flow pigment is on the edge, of course it's dripping off, and you can see it down on the floor there. So this is kind of just giving us a start. And at this point, after we've got 2 cups of our Fusion Flow pigment poured out onto the surface, we're gonna go ahead now and we're gonna go around the edge again a couple more times just to give it some more volume of material. And again, we're doing the same exact thing again. We're pouring it just a 1/4 of an inch so away from the edge, and then allowing it to flow on its own over the edge. So that was 1 time around. I've still got about a 1/2 cup left. And again, you can see what this is doing to the edge here. It's really creating such a natural look, and it's giving it the look that this is just one thick slab of stone. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna continue on because we're gonna have enough in this cup to go around at least 1 more time. I have a little bit left. So with this little bit, I think I'm gonna try to go around 1 more time, just a really, really thin layer. Now, you can see how earlier I was talking about using everything in the bottom of the cup to create veins. We did one earlier, and here's the result of it. You see it's had about 5 minutes now to develop, and you can see how this vein has opened up on the surface. So some really cool effects that you can get with this product. So far we've used 2 cups on our edge, and we've used 2 cups to fill in the main part of the surface. So it looks really good. You can really see how the Fusion Pigments in combination with the Fusion Flow resin, how they're really working together, they're fusing together, and they're creating just these incredible looks of natural stone. But this is still not enough material. We want to add more to this. So we're going to go ahead and add a couple more cups to the surface here to fill everything in. So again, it's just a matter of repeating the process over and over again. So we pour it on our blade here, and then we pour it on the surface. And we go back and forth, allowing as much as possible to drip off of the knife. Go ahead again, pour another bead. Same thing again. And again, we let it go right off the edge. All right, so we're down to our last cup of the Fusion pigment. And so what we want to use this cup for is just filling in any areas that we see that are a little bare, where there's a little too much of the metallic epoxy showing through underneath. So if we look at an area like this, you can see there's quite a bit of titanium metallic that's showing through. Now, this is all personal preference. You may choose to leave that and have a little more of the metallic showing through. But in this case, I'm gonna wanna fill that in a little bit more. So that's what we're gonna use our last cup for, is for really just kind of going around and filling in any little voids that might still remain. So we can do that by just really focusing right on those spots. Letting it drip off the knife right onto the spots that we want to fill. And you can see that obviously now that's a little bit of a puddle right there. That's okay. Over the next few minutes, that's actually going to flatten itself out and blend in with the rest of the surface. So this part of our Coronado Fusion countertop surface is now complete. It took us about 20 minutes from the time that we mixed up and applied our Fusion Flow resin to this stage here where we've finished applying our Fusion pigments. And as you can see, it was real easy to do. In fact, it's really hard to mess this up. Even if you don't quite pour on the pigments evenly, we saw how when puddles fell off the knife, or when I poured it out of the cup to make veins, it really didn't matter. You can see it all really fusing together here to create this incredible, unique, but real authentic look. You can just see the detail that's starting to develop within the surface, creating a lot of cells in the surface that are real natural looking. You can see how there's very, very fine veins that are running throughout the surface, just like you would find in nature, in natural stone. So that's the look that we were going for with this particular surface, this Coronado. But we have so many different kits available in so many different color combinations, but the installation process of it is still gonna be all the same. So we're gonna let this go ahead and cure overnight, and then we're going to come back tomorrow and we're going to put the countertop epoxy on top of it. So we've allowed this surface to dry for about 24 hours, and what we did last night before we left was we let it set for approximately 3 hours, and then we had an oscillating fan that was about 5 feet away. We let that blow across the surface on a low speed. just to create a little bit of air movement across the surface in order to help it to dry. If you don't use a fan, it's just going to take probably a little bit longer to dry, but in this case the room temperature was about 70 degrees, and again after about 3 hours we set up a little oscillating fan just to create just a little bit of air movement across the surface. And here we are about 24 hours later, and the surface is dry and ready for our countertop epoxy to be applied. But just look at the detail that's in this countertop surface. This Fusion surface countertop system really makes it super easy for anyone to be able to create a surface that is really natural, looks real and authentic, and has just beautiful coloring patterns. You can see all of the veins that are showing up in it, and even a lot of the cells that look really cool in this surface. So we've allowed it to dry, like I said, for about 24 hours. The next step is to put on the countertop epoxy on top of it to lock everything in and to give it some protection. But just before we do that, there's a little cleanup that we want to take care of, and that is any of the drip marks or anything that is on the edges of the countertop. So this is how we do it. So in order to clean up these drips, we take something like this, a wallpaper scraper, or any type of knife will actually do. And what we want to do is just carefully run it along the bottom here, and you can see that any little bits of drip marks or some of the resin that's gotten up underneath, we're just able to very easily scrape that off. We're being careful with it, but we'll go all the way around this countertop, and we'll be able to clean all that up before we put the countertop epoxy on top. So now it's time to apply our countertop epoxy to this dry surface. And this countertop epoxy will come in your kit as a 1.5 gallon kit of countertop epoxy. It's a 2-to-1 mix, so there's 2 parts of A to 1 part of B. It's a gallon of A and a half a gallon of B. So we recommend applying about 3 ounces of the countertop epoxy per square foot. So in this particular case, we're working with a surface that's approximately 30 square feet. So we're gonna go ahead and mix up a 96 ounce batch of this countertop epoxy in order to apply to this kitchen island. So to do that, it's just like our other products. Again, it's a 2-to-1 mix. So we're gonna go with 64 ounces of part A. There. And then we're gonna go with 32 ounces of the part B hardener. And we want to make sure that we're using an accurate amount of parts A and B in order for this to cure properly on the surface. And now we'll add our hardener. Then we're going to take our drill and mixing paddle, and again at a moderate speed we're going to go ahead and mix this for about 2 minutes. So we've got our mixed material here in the bucket, and now we're going to apply it to this surface. So we're going to dump it out. Going to keep it 4 or 5 inches away from the edge. Pour out the whole contents the bucket here. And then just like the Fusion Flow resin, there's really different ways that you can spread this across the surface. You could use a squeegee, you could use a roller, a brush, but once again, I'm just going to use my hands to do it. So we're going to spread it out over the surface, and this is a self-leveling epoxy, so it's going to settle in all the low spots and give us a nice even finish when we're done. So I'm just spreading it around. And you can feel, as your hands glide across it, you can feel the low spots. And again, we're applying about 3 ounces per square foot. So you can see that I've just spread this half of the surface with my hands, and you can see how quickly already the countertop epoxy has already evened out the surface and is laying really flat up on the surface. So I'm just going to continue to go around and spread the epoxy across the entire surface. And again, I'm bringing it right to the edge. Some of it will begin to drip over the edge. And then I'm going to take my hand, push a little bit more over the edge just like this. And then make sure the entire edge surface is covered. Now this countertop here has a 2-inch thick edge, so that's probably not typical of most of the countertops. Yours will probably have maybe a 1-inch or 3/4 inch. However, the principles of installation still apply. So what you want to make sure you do is look across the surface at various angles to make sure there are not any voids or any spots that you've missed. So as we look across the surface, if we see any voids, we're going to go and we're just going to push a little bit more material with our hands. So I see a little spot here. We're going to come over and we're going to push a little more material just right into that spot there, just to make sure it all gets covered. So the countertop epoxy has been applied. It's an ultra clear product, high heat resistant, very easy to apply, self-leveling, and you can see what it's done to this Fusion surface here. This is again the Coronado, and look at how the colors just pop from it. The epoxy brings out the natural look in this surface. It's going to provide protection. And what we're going to do now is we're going to let this cure overnight once again, and then we're going to come back tomorrow and we'll show you the finished result. So here we are. We've allowed our countertop epoxy to dry overnight, and you can see that it has created really an amazing surface. These Fusion surface countertop kits are super easy to install, and you can see that they create incredible detail that mimic real stone. Once again, just look at the detail that we were able to create using one of these Fusion surface countertop kits. You can see the veining is really natural. There's so much detail that is shown up in the surface, a lot of cells, and just ribboning of colors, layers of colors. Something that really looks like natural stone. And you'll remember that this was super easy to do. This entire surface actually only took us about 20 minutes to create. And you see even the edge detail that we were able to capture really makes this look like it's a slab of natural stone. I just created this countertop surface using one of our Fusion Surface countertop kits available at epoxyplus.com. We have over 100 combinations available that will allow you to create a surface very similar to this. For more information about this kit or any of the other Fusion Surface countertop kits, visit www.epoxyplus.com.